If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description. Welcome to MINDSHOCK True Crime. This is your host, Bruce McGuire.
And JR.
And JR is our government representative, government agent. You've been missing in action for quite some time, but we have a podcast today that is one of the most important topics within true crime and how different agencies and statistics work relating to missing persons. This is the missing. And we will examine if there are way more people missing than have been reported, because if someone is not reported missing, but they are missing, how do we know? How do we track that? And are serial killers vastly more numerous than the mainstream or official sources in trying to calm the public to a certain extent would like the masses to believe? As always, if you like the podcast, donate to our PayPal. Check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and we will have exclusive content on the Facebook page, not available elsewhere. So make sure you like and follow the Facebook page, facebook.com/MindshockPodcast. You could also check us out Reddit, Twitter, and Patreon, and patrons do get priority for request. All right, JR, you've never really stated exactly where you worked, with whom you've worked, and I know you're not going to. So there's
I won't, Bruce. I'm sorry.
There's no need to press on that regard. But you do seem to have worked, at least in some capacity, with different agencies or personnel from different agencies. So in general, how would you rate statistics management or the accuracy of statistics with agencies like the FBI or the CIA or local PDs in terms of accurate tracking and reporting of missing persons?
That's an interesting question, Bruce, because, I mean, the CIA, they have a different mission. So, I mean, missing persons are missing persons. If we're talking about a youth or some sort of, obviously a public citizen that's not in any type of situation, the FBI is actually very aggressive in trying to retrieve them. That's one of their, keystone missions, as well as the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children. However, I will say that in terms of, if we're talking about like Don, Julio, who, blew up a couple of munitions factories, and like he suddenly ends up, buried in a bridge. I mean, like, just use the Jimmy Hoffa thing. With all the resources of the FBI, if they really wanted to find out where he was, which I probably am pretty sure that they actually know where he is buried. That's probably classified information. But they could figure it out. So I mean, but the public may never know. So in terms of if you're you have a loved one that was went missing or something like that, the FBI would be all on board, as well as, again, the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, in terms of finding them. If you're like some sort of a crime boss and like you just magically are erased, that opens up the gray area that I think is the keystone of your channel.
Yeah, there's see, the problem with statistics is their reporting, whether they were reported accurately or not, and the spin that's kind of put on all of this.
I think it also depends, Bruce. I mean, honestly, like, how many other agencies are involved? Like, if we're talking about, like, Joe Blow that went camping with his, like, 10-year-old daughter, and his 10-year-old daughter goes missing, obviously the first thing is going to be, like, let's talk to Joe Blow. Like, where the hell is your daughter? Like, why would you let her, wander off? If we're talking about, like, Don such and such, and he's got, like, a militia somewhere packing heat, like, the whole, like, scope of making that public is going to be completely different.
Okay, well, let's before we get into the nitty-gritty of true crime, we have to, since you are JR and you have some knowledge that the average citizen doesn't necessarily have, let's examine it from the extreme conspiracy angle. Supposedly, I mean, it's not even that much of a conspiracy, really. I mean, if you can go on various media outlets. True TV has documentaries. You can go on FBI statistics. So nearly 1 million people go missing in the United States every year. So we're talking now. This is not worldwide. This is just U.S. statistics here. So, because I do know, obviously, in third world countries or less developed countries, their statistics and tracking are. I mean, what are you going to do if you're in some remote village, someone goes missing and nobody knows about it? How is anybody ever going to know about it? So, without going into that dark slide, because I mean, is it really hyperbole to suggest that millions upon millions of people go missing worldwide based on just the U.S. statistics of 1 million per year, where we have video cameras on almost every street corner?
Well, I mean, like, let me just interject for a second, Bruce. And again, I promised you I wouldn't go off on any of my weird government tangents. But for example, 250,000 children are reported missing every year. And those are statistics through the National Center for Exploiting Children. It's not classified. There are about 250,000 children. 80% or 85% plus of those are a situation where perhaps there was a domestic incident and children were taken by a relative.
Well,
So,
yes,
there are a million.
I was just going to get to that. A large percentage are either teenage runaways that become accounted for, or as in your example, a family member takes the child without another family member
Consent.
knowing about it. So a report is filed, and that report is put in the system. But even if we're talking, but even whether factoring those in or not, I mean, what are we looking at? Over 2,300 people per day? Is that a little mind-shocking, JR, per day?
It's substantial, but I mean, I think what people forget is that, we're the government of America is a continent. It's not. It doesn't represent. We, for some reason, and I don't understand it. Maybe it's because we're a young country, but we seem to look to Europe as this example of, maybe we should be doing this, maybe we should be doing that. I feel like, what they don't understand is that we have double the population at a minimum of Russia, and we're the same size. So our situation is different than Europe. I see all the time on, social media and these other outlets where we're constantly being compared to the UK and European, countries. But when you talk about it, when you think about it, a lot of these countries have less population than most of our states, even our states which don't have a lot of people in them. I mean, we're talking about 300 to 360 million people. So the United States is big. I don't even think that, people that live in the United States understand that. I mean, forget Europe, because, I mean, you can go on YouTube and, they're just we don't understand, American culture. Yeah, no, you don't, because, you've got fucking, 400,000 people living in your country.
All right. You're going off the rails here again, JR. Let's focus here. So in 2018, the NCIC missing persons and unidentified persons statistics stated 1.8 million file transactions. Now, to be fair, of course, the resolved or canceled transactions we have as of last December 31st, 2018, there's over 85,000 active entries. So as you said, now that could be for a variety of reasons. If someone is found dead, then or declared dead, what happens in that case? So they're still missing, but for whatever reason, if they're legally declared dead, even without a body. So there's a lot of variables here that are unaccounted for.
Well, and again, with 85,000 people, I mean, with 85 people, to someone with a heart and a soul, that's a lot of people. But I mean, honestly, Bruce, 85,000 people amongst 365 something million people. Those, I mean, we hear it all the time from the BBC. Oh, America is dangerous. No, it's that statistic is actually low considering our population level.
Well, hold on, and that brings me to my next. No, but that's the whole point of this podcast. Those are the known missing. How many missing people have never been reported? That's going to bring me to
So,
my next point, and this isn't necessarily specifically about serial killers, but we of course do need to touch upon serial killers. And right before we do, I would like to ask you, in general, do you believe the FBI and other various government agencies have been truthful in reporting on serial killers, the number of serial killers, and whether or not there is an active serial killer in a specific area throughout the years, throughout history?
um, well, you put me in a dark spot, Bruce. I mean, honestly, I mean, like, like I'm loyal to the federal government. I've been a member of the federal government for many years, but I will say that no, I don't believe that they've been completely honest. I think that they're honest when they need to be honest. I think that, like when it comes to a juncture where they need the public's help, all of a sudden a case arises. I think that there's many cases that are, under the radar. I think they do that for multiple reasons. I think some of them are legitimate. I think some of them, are to save their own face. I think that, nobody, when you enter the federal realm, the scope becomes, do we want to let the American people know how many nut jobs we really have running around? The answer will always be no. I mean, I don't know if you've ever worked for the federal government. I know, like, I've worked on various levels, but no one wants to be that guy that says, "Hey, you know what? Like, we have this many nut jobs running around." So, no, I don't think that they're
All right, let me
upfront.
let me double back for just a moment, because I think there's an issue. There's a major issue here because, okay, I am on the U.S. Department of State website right now on state.gov. I am looking at the 2019 human trafficking persons report. So right here, it states that right at the beginning, it's the message from the Secretary of State. Human trafficking is one of the most heinous crimes on earth. Right now, traffickers are robbing a staggering 24.9 million people of their freedom and basic human dignity. That's roughly 3 times the population of New York City. So this is Michael R.
Right.
Pompeo's message here. And I mean, that's a staggering number. We're 24.9 million, and I'm guessing here, but I would say a large percentage, if not the majority of that, would probably be minors, right? I mean, we're not. I don't think. I mean, our
Well, what I mean, when we examine those figures, we're not just talking about like like people that are being brought into the country illegally as mules. We're talking about drug mules. We're talking about children that are actually our physical citizenship, that like were born here and are American citizens, but are being turned out illegally for sexual exploitation. We're talking about various different factors.
how do so here's the big issue here. How is all of this tracked? Because let's say parents, unfortunately, in some third world countries, I mean, these parents could be drug addicted or in destitute poverty, illness, whatever. They might sell their own children, so they would never be reported missing. So obviously, we don't have exact statistics on any of this, but obviously, a certain percentage of people being trafficked are never reported missing. So how are statistics reconciled when we have here, according to this, and I don't know if you think that's an accurate number, 24.9 million. That's a relatively specific number. They did not.
That's a very substantial number, Bruce. And I have to say, like, I'm not an expert in this particular area, but I will say that, there are certain biases that exist. For one, there's, with anything, whether you're an accountant and you're a bean counter, or whether you just run a small business, there's always that presumption of something that you don't know. There's the gray area, the mathematical gray area. So, I mean, like, what the figures you're talking about, there's a mathematical gray area. What I am saying is that, there's a certain, like, justified figure. I'm not aware of what that figure is, but we're not talking about just like the John Bonet case where all of a sudden like someone comes into your house and steals your baby in the middle of the night and slits your throat. I'm talking about like, just in basic situation.
Wait, that's what
There
you
are
believe.
people.
Wait. That's what you believe happened in the John Benet Ramsey case, because we do cover that case
I'm
on
not.
mine.
No, that's a separate podcast, Bruce. But what I'm saying is that, in terms of, there are people that enter into agreements where they're willing to be turned out, not understanding the ramifications of that, and that increases the gray area.
Yeah, that's a
So
fair
we're
point.
talking about.
That's a fair point. There's a lot of people that are tricked. Yes, as you said, they might think they're going to some kind of job or whatever the case may be, or some kind
Or
of.
they might even know that they're going to be a sexual, like, participant, or something of thereof, but they're not aware of the full breadth of what they're giving up. And once they sign the form, or once they meet the John, all of a sudden people are there with machine guns and they have no choice.
Yes, of course, of course. I'm just saying that I think it's a little bit fallacious to just say, "Oh, well, we have these FBI statistics for missing people, and that's the end of that." There could be a large number. There could be an extremely large number of missing people that are not reported for whatever reasons.
Well, and yeah, you're right. But you also have to understand, Bruce, that, like, these statistics are based on the fact that we have local government, county government, state government, and federal government. Places like Canada, they don't have county government. They don't have that level of oversight. It goes from municipality to state. So, like, we're talking about, there are multiple phases here where there are statistics that get passed down the train that may or may not be accurate. And the bias of those claims, but once they're passed from hand to hand to hand, it might inflate the numbers and it might deflate the numbers. We might actually have even more than we were talking about.
And yes, and even those errors aside, I'm saying, what about when they're never even reported to any agency at all? Because
Which is the most likely case.
Within organized crime and such, people might be too scared to report the missing person because they don't want to be killed themselves, or they think it's hopeless, or whatever. There's almost infinite variables that would cause a missing person to not be reported. Okay, let's circle back to the serial killers now. So this is a research article. This was published November 1st, 2007 by Kenna Quinnett, Indiana University. It's called The Missing Toward a Quantification of Serial Murder Victimization in the U.S. The abstract states, although early attempts to estimate the number of serial murder victims in the U.S. varied greatly and were exaggerated, current estimates may actually underestimate the number of serial murder victims. This study provides extrapolation from existing databases, including missing persons, unidentified dead, and misidentified dead, to estimate uncounted serial murder victims. In addition to providing lower and upper estimates of possible victims from these sources, this article also provides a methodology for counting the missing persons who were never reported as missing, and some of whom may be serial murder victims. By counting various sources of possible hidden serial murder victims, the addition of a lower estimate of 182 and an upper estimate of 1,832 additional annual serial murder victims in the U.S. is suggested. Okay, this is mind-shocking. These are bombshells being dropped here that, for whatever reason, I see online through various criminology communities and social media and such, there's this, everybody just continues stating the propaganda that there are less serial killers than ever before, your chances of being murdered by a serial killer are very low, and they completely ignore these statistics. And one thing that we haven't really talked about on MindShock, and a lot of people don't talk about, is the misidentified dead. So when a dead body is misidentified as a different person, that could lead to all kinds of confusion as well. And then, of course, people.
Well, I mean, can I interject something without rambling? I mean, okay, all right. So let me just say something. The idea of a serial killer lodged next to a terrorist is different. if you asked people back in the day, did Tim McVeigh, was he a terrorist or was he a serial killer? Most people would state that he was a serial killer because back in the day we didn't have organizations such as ISIS or so on and so forth that made it known that they were terrorists. So people can be mislabeled. I mean, he brought down an entire building in Oklahoma. He killed hundreds of people and hundreds of children. But at the same time,
allegedly, right? We're not going down that conspiracy rabbit hole.
we're not going down any of those rabbit holes. But in addition to that, well, I mean, him and Terry Nichols were pretty upfront about it as well, I will say. But that said, and being a federal man myself, I might be biased in talking about that, and I'm just being upfront. But moving forward with something like, for example, Jeffrey Dahmer, who was a true serial killer, and he was an admitted serial killer. He was upfront when he was finally caught. That in and of itself it varies very differently from, say, that situation where they had they were talking about Waco and all this other. Jeffrey Dahmer had his own psychological problems. I mean, even with who do you call it? Tried to assassinate Reagan. With and he had this obsession with Jodie Foster. So I mean,
what the heck? You said without rambling. This has been a long ramble.
It's a long ramble, but I'm just saying that, like, what I was trying to identify with the viewers is that what's considered a serial killer today might be considered a national terrorist as well.
Okay.
Whereas 20 years ago,
that's fine, but
not
really,
the case.
That's fine, but that distinguishing those labels isn't really that relevant.
Well, you're talking about labels.
We're talking about people being killed, so it doesn't really matter who killed them, we're talking about the missing statistics here. We're talking about the missing. So regardless as to what kind of crime they were.
Wait, the reason why I said this was not to get off on a subtopic. Terrorists don't care about who they kill.
Okay, so
actual serial killers do. So if you look at Son of Sam, if you look at Son of Sam, if you look at Terry Nichols, if you look at like various serial killers, they actually targeted people that they knew would not need to be found.
Okay.
Whereas a terrorist would actually, like, they don't care. They do the butterfly effect with a bomb on their vest, and that's it. But serial killers have they have a goal. They want to kill, but they want to kill discreetly.
Yes, that's what we're talking about here. So obviously, if a terrorist walks into some kind of building, blows it up, I mean, you can figure out who was in the building. You have security cameras. You can test remains to the best of your ability. You have a list of employees that work there. That's a relatively accounted for situation. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the serial killers. So distinguishing those labels is fine, and everything that you said is accurate.
Well, I'm only doing that because serial killers typically, like, they target, like, prostitutes. They typically target, like, perhaps, like, sexually oriented people that are not accepted in their own family. They target, individuals that are alone and are not going to be missed. Whereas terrorists do.
In certain cases. So
in a lot of cases.
Yes, but serial killers also kill who they can find. Like, if they see somebody walking down the street, walking home from school, they might kill them, and they do in certain cases. We have that. We have that. So, but
of course, I'm saying that they don't. I'm just saying, like, typically, like, they look for opportunity where they know that they can
Exactly. So in speaking to this study, there are I don't know why you went off on terrorists, but misidentified people. So let's say there was either a prostitute or a homeless person, someone who, as you've stated, might not necessarily have known family or friends to miss them or file a report or whatnot. There are a lot of these people around, and maybe they died of natural causes, maybe they didn't, maybe their body was misidentified. That could all lead to a lot of confusion. And so in this study here, it states that there are extra serial murder victims. And the range they give is staggering. It's so annually there could be an additional 182 or 1,832. I mean, that's a staggering range. And I think that really speaks to the unknowns in when you're dealing with variables and the uncertainty of life. Many people, the cognitive dissonant masses, as I refer to them in many podcasts, they think that whatever's reported is true. And they just
Well,
really
I
don't
mean,
think about the unknowns. The unknowns are there's more unknowns than knowns. So it's
and you're right. I mean, and first of all, the reason why, just to clarify, like to the viewers, I wasn't going off on a tangent. I just wanted to disseminate the difference between a national terrorist and a serial killer, because some people might not understand that. The second thing is Bruce, honestly, when you have a serial killer and like they're sentenced to either life or death, the other cases, whether they've killed 2 people or they've killed 200, in the court's eyes, based on cost, which is sad to say, but it's an honest argument. A lot of cases, they know these serial killers have killed multiple people, but they'll just close the cases because they know that the person that they were hunting was associated and is charged with either life or death. So, I mean, and this is the credence to certain people who were killed by serial killers will never have their day in court because they killed multiple people. So they try one case, they win, and then the state or the federal government doesn't want to pay any more money to the actual litigation team to move forward.
Okay. Yes, very very important topic, but it's not relevant to what we're discussing because in those cases, not necessarily relevant because in those cases, you're absolutely right. There are other victims which they might not have been able to prove, but they know those victims were the victim of a serial killer. They just might not have proved that it.
Well, but it's not. It is relevant because I mean, like there are victims where
a different data set because the known victim.
It's not though, because there are situations where there was a gray area where this person was associated with this other person and they don't have any evidence whatsoever, but this person ended up dead. But this other person killed 5 people.
That's what I'm saying. That person that ended up dead is part of the data set that they know about. We're discussing now the data set that's not known about, the unknowns. So that in where they don't even suspect, like in the case you outlined, that's a very, very important topic where serial killers might be put away or prosecuted for certain victims, but not other victims. So they might suspect the other victims belong to this serial killer as well. They just can't prove it, or they don't go after it for monetary reasons or whatever, or they don't think they can prove it, whatever the case may be. But those victims are known. We're talking about the missing. So we're talking about situations where it's not even known whether there's a dead body or not. Because the person, so this unique data set, which could be huge, is where they could be, they don't even know if the person is dead or not. And then in other situations, they don't even know if the person is missing. Because people, they don't track, as you've said, serial killers, a lot of times, they will choose victims that are either homeless, prostitutes, or drug addict, people that are on the fringes of society that aren't necessarily connected to family or friends that would report them missing. So,
right.
Yeah, so this is the data set we're looking at. I'm going to read one more article, a more recent article. This was posted February 12th, 2008, and updated June 1st, 2018. Louis Beale from the Pacific Standard. Missing, and serial killers. The most common victims of serial killers may be much more numerous than experts generally believe. And just one more point in this culture of authoritarian worship where everybody trusts the experts on everything, like dogmatically, as if the experts are somehow priests. So if the propaganda machine spins, there are less serial killers than ever before, or things of that nature, the masses just blindly believe it. And you can kind of see it in true crime culture online on social
Well,
media.
because people want to believe it, Bruce. I mean,
Yeah,
honestly, like,
of course.
people want to believe, hey, like, we're doing the right thing. We elected someone, there's less serial killers, period. But
Yes.
that's not the case.
Yeah, so the article states this: when Washington State's notorious Green River Killer was arrested in 2001, police estimated he had murdered 48 women. But at least one academic thinks he accounted for a lot more victims, upwards of 50 or more. Kenna Quinnett, an associate professor in the School of Public and Environmental Affairs at Indiana University, Indianapolis, points out that at least one-third of the killer's known victims had never been reported missing, were absent from police missing persons databases, or remained unidentified. Many were female prostitutes or teenage runaways. Referring to these victims as missing, transients on the lower rung of society whose absence seems to go unnoted, Quinnett said. You can't kill 50 CEOs, cops, or professors in the US. There would be a whole SWAT mentality. We would hunt you down. Quinnett's recent paper, The Missing Toward a Quantification of Serial Murder Victimization in the US, which I just mentioned prior, which was published in the journal Homicide Studies, argues that victims of serial murderers are being grossly undercounted in this country. She believes the most accurate figure may be as high as 1,832 serial killer victims annually, or 10 times the number given by recent academic estimates. Quinnett claims all known calculations tend to neglect people who have never been reported missing, which could include throwaways, kids kicked out of the house by their parents, bodies so disfigured they can't be identified, marginals, such as the homeless, prostitutes and illegal immigrants, and people who are, quote, expected to die, end quote, those in nursing homes, in hospitals, and under custodial care. And another thing I will add is people involved in criminal enterprises, because they're not necessarily going to go to the police and report somebody. They don't want to have anything to do with the police. So within crime populations and criminal activities, they might not necessarily report these things. So, okay, back to the article. It's not that no one cares about these people, according to Quinnett. It's more an information issue. I don't believe the police care any less about the death of prostitutes. It's a matter of, in the US, we did not have a system that linked missing persons and unidentified dead. Quinnett's research came up with some interesting statistical anomalies. She notes, for example, that people who have outstanding warrants for their arrest are never referred to as missing, but as fugitives. Well, that's kind of messed up, because if you have a warrant for, let's say, some kind of petty nonviolent drug crime or prostitution or whatnot, you'll never be listed as a missing person. So if you're a victim of a serial killer, that will go unknown. So that's pretty crazy, because I would imagine there are quite a few people that have been picked up for either prostitution or some kind of petty drug crime, petty theft, things of that nature. People in crime-ridden areas. So if they go missing and killed by a serial killer, that's never tracked. Would you consider that alarming, JR?
Yeah, I would, Bruce. I mean, honestly, like, I think what we're talking about here is the classification of people. I mean, based on, I mean, if we were talking about a ritzy, white woman that was, living in a mansion somewhere and she went missing, there would be resources immediately tapped. But if we're talking about, say, an African American lady that sold her body at some juncture because she had to for her own purpose, like, the scope of that particular argument would be different in terms of the federal government. Do I think it's right? No. Do I think that it should be changed? Yes. But that said, I think that what we're entering into a political type argument in terms of what's right and what's wrong.
Well, yeah,
They'll always
let's
going to be those people.
we could take it to another extreme end. Let's say the person who has the outstanding warrant is some kind of violent criminal offender. Let's say he's some kind of mobster, whatever, or gang member. Let's say he's even killed people. If he becomes the victim of a serial killer who, let's say, is relatively indiscriminate. There's all kinds of serial killers out there. Some kill men and women, some, or even the ones that kill only men. Let's say he didn't know that person was a violent criminal because maybe that person was either smaller in stature or whatnot, and he killed that individual. But because that individual was a known violent criminal with an outstanding warrant, there's no real notification in the community, and other law-abiding citizens are put at risk because of this kind of classification mess with statistics. So even looking at it from that point of view, where even if the person killed was a violent individual, maybe that serial killer saved someone's life. Maybe that person that they killed, he would have killed somebody else. But regardless, there's a danger to the community because this guy is also killing peaceful, law-abiding citizens. But because
Well,
of
I mean, like Bruce, honestly, I mean, like there's the heroes of America, there's the, you know, there's the enemies of America. I mean, it would only stand to reason based on the amount of people we have that there were anti-heroes that were, they did good, but they weren't good in the scope of what they did. That I mean, mathematically, whether or not you believe in science or religion or whatever, like those people exist in our country, like, and we have to live with that. But I mean, seriously, like, in terms of the actual perception out to the American people, I mean, is that going to get 10 minutes on CNN? Is that going to get 10 minutes on NBC? I mean, like, you're
well,
talking about
I don't
things
know
that
because
aren't talked about.
yes, exactly, and that's a problem because these unknown variables could be substantial. So, but anyway, back to the article mentioning the case of Herb Baumeister, an Indiana serial killer. Quinnett notes that several of his victims had been missing, but because they also had outstanding warrants, no one was really looking for them. And that's kind of ironic as well, right? Because they have an outstanding warrant and nobody looks for them. Their missing families don't even report them as missing, Quinnett said, of the missing. They're estranged from their families and no one follows up. These people fall between the cracks. It's no one's fault. It's the transient nature of their lives and the lack of information sharing and the fact that missing persons cases are not the most glorified police work. This is not priority police work. This is something that I brought up with Maxwell on various on various true crime podcast episodes. That if all of the resources of PDs, like instead of setting people up, instead of using officers for speed traps or some of these petty offenses, if they were all specifically trained and allocated for missing persons, I think more of a dent could be put into this problem in society, and the overall amount of cold cases could be brought down substantially. But that's just my opinion. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that, like, you're probably right in general. I think that what comes into, in terms of speed traps and stuff, what you're talking about is actual, like, local municipality economics, which that differs from actual crime fighting. I think that you're right in the scope of if all our officers weren't focused on petty drugs, they weren't focused on trafficking. If they were focused on like basics, like just crime fighting, um, we would probably have a better scope on everything. But at the same time, the city relies on the police department to produce a certain economic situation. I don't think a lot of people think of that when they
All right,
think
well,
of,
you're getting off on a tangent here now, but let's circle back.
No, I'm not. I'm just simply answering your question. I mean,
Well,
a lot of
You answered
times,
it in
like,
the first part. If cold cases were prioritized, more of a dent would be made in them.
but
That's it.
cold cases don't make the town money, and they don't produce new vests, they don't produce new guns, they don't produce new cars. The police department, traffic tickets do. So I think that like there's a calling to what I mean. They
Yeah, but
produce what they need
you're
to.
getting into a really shady argument because taxes already are allocated for all those things.
it's not shady because taxes are allocated for a lot of things. Most of the things that taxes are allocated for have to be fought for in a town hall meeting, which, it's up to like the 3 or 4 citizens
Yeah,
that
but
show
you're
up
also
to that
talking.
meeting.
Yeah, but you're also talking about paying the paychecks and the hours for the officers sitting there for a speed trap or arresting people peacefully growing plants. I mean, that all costs money
I'm
as well.
saying that a police department, in the eyes of a government, and I'm just saying this, in the eyes of a government, a police department that stamps traffic tickets and produces money for the city based on fines and whatever, and arrests petty drug offenders and produces money for the city in terms of
Well,
fines and
actually,
whatever, is more productive
it's
than
not the war on drugs has cost trillions of dollars in
it,
taxpayer
it
revenue.
doesn't matter about the war on drugs. I'm not talking about the war on crime either. I'm talking about the sustainability of a local government.
Yeah, but
You're talking about
well,
shit
no,
that's
yeah, but
beyond.
those are two completely different things. Because yes, you're right. The traffic
They're
offenses,
not.
they are the traffic
They're
offenses.
not. The local
They,
government, the
hold
local
on a
police
second.
care about
Hold on a second.
producing.
Hold on a second. The local traffic offenses are generating money. Arresting people for growing plants costs money. So they're two opposite things.
Right. Well, but that's what the problem is, Bruce. I mean, when you talk about local police, we're not talking about state police. We're not talking about federal police. We're talking about local police. The local police are going to police what makes their government money so they can finance their operation.
Well,
That's the
yes.
problem.
Well, with the traffic offenses, yes. With arresting people for plants, that costs money. So if they got rid of that, then they
It
wouldn't have.
doesn't necessarily, I mean, like, it doesn't necessarily, I mean, because the fines and whatever. But, I mean, what I'm saying is that when you talk about the local spectrum, they're worried about arresting people and fining people to produce for their community. When you talk about the state level, they're worried about eradicating crime, but at the same time, they're also worried about putting the game
All right,
changers away.
let's go back to the task at hand. Quinette has been.
With the federal government, wait, no, I need to finish this. With the federal government, they're worried about eradicating crime in general, but again, with that scope, we move back to the municipal government. If the police didn't arrest anybody and nobody did anything wrong, there would be no financial traffic generated within the scope, so the town wouldn't make money. So it's a gray area.
Okay. Quinette has been interested in this issue since the 1980s when she wrote a graduate school paper debunking the notion that there were 5,000 annual serial murders in the US. But not long ago, while discussing the Baumeister case with some buddies in the Indianapolis Police Department, she said, I told them if the victims, mostly gay males, had been college co-eds, you guys would have had a task force by the second or third victims. They said, these guys come up missing all the time. And we started discussing transient victims. The idea of keeping track of this population, who's going to report another prostitute as missing? So, what's ironic here is that Quinette actually started off debunking the sensationalized hyperbole of 5,000 annual serial murders, if that's what it was, if there was much less, and this was to, a kind of yellow journalism panic situation where they just wanted headlines. And then now the situation almost went backwards, where now there's a downplaying of serial murders as if to suggest society has improved in that regard. So, continuing on, Quinette used a number of sources for her research, known information about serial killers and their victims, data about missing persons, hospital census figures, and any numbers available about the missing. She also dipped into reporting done by the Seattle Post Intelligencer on serial killing in Washington, which she used to extrapolate figures for the country as a whole. I believe my lower range, 182 victims annually, is extremely conservative, said Quinette, and that would double the yearly number. But things may be getting better, at least in a statistical sense. With last year's funding of NamUs, the National Missing and Unidentified Person System, police departments, coroners, and medical examiners now have a national database of missing persons records and unidentified decedent cases. You know what's crazy? It took this long. I mean, the United States, it just mind-shocking, mind-boggling on how all of this works and the incompetency running rampant through all of it. But to just going back to how people kind of parrot the in any kind of missing persons case, oh well, the chance that they were killed by a serial killer is very low. There's a lot less serial killers than before, and all of these things. If that's not true, then people need to take more seriously missing persons cases, because maybe they are a victim of a violent crime, and maybe the serial murders are much more prevalent than the mainstream propaganda would lead the average individual to believe.
Well, I mean, I think that like your viewers should like read the book The Sociopath Next Door, because I mean it's like 1 in like 5 people is totally sociopath and doesn't give a shit about you at all. I mean, like it's again like what you're talking about, Bruce, is there's a certain fake stratosphere that might exist in terms of discussing something with somebody, and they might be complacent, but they might have totally opposing views, in their own mind, but they're just being kind. The same thing exists, I mean, with all kinds of things. So that can lead to a situation where you're talking to somebody and, you think you're friends with that person, but they don't share the same views as you. They're just being nice. And that sentiment, that whole nice sentiment, it can open doors. I mean, in most serial cases, it does. I mean, in most serial, killer cases, there's empathy for the victim before execution. So, I don't know what you're driving at officially, but I will say that in terms of your viewership, I would say that if you're gonna have a friend, or if you're gonna make a friend, be careful, because you never know what somebody else is thinking. It's Annette Bening and American American.
Once again, oh yes, that is true, but not really directly relevant to what we're talking about. For example, if a serial killer who does not know the victim never talked to the victim, if a serial killer is actually a really good serial killer, nobody's gonna know they exist.
It was American Beauty, by the way. It wasn't American Pie.
Okay, so they're not even gonna know that a really good serial killer exists, because if the bodies are never found, people could just think, oh, this person ran away. Oh, this prostitute changed cities. Like, she just left the city. Because there is no body found. So if a serial killer is truly good at what they do and the bodies are not found, that doesn't mean the serial killer doesn't exist. So that's kind of the whole.
No, of course not. And they do. I mean, they exist. I mean, I hate to say it, but they exist in your viewership's own community. Like, it's they're there. Whether or not they're active, that's one thing, but being a serial killer is common.
Well, according to Quinnett, they are far more active than what's reported. So the reported statistics of active serial killers might be extremely understated currently. And let me just finish the article here. Yet there is still much to be done. Quinnett believes there should be better missing persons reports management on the part of the police, such as not purging missing persons report at the end of the year, but renewing them. So that's also extremely shocking. At the end of the year, they just get rid of certain reports. So if we go back to those stats from the FBI where there are they cleared because that missing person was found? So out of the million, or the close to 1 million number, if not more than 1 million of missing people that go missing every year, the ones that are cleared, were they really cleared because that person showed up, or that other family member returned them, or they were accounted for? Or were they cleared because that's part of procedure to clear them at the end of the year if nothing's been done with them? I mean, that's just.
Well, I think, Bruce, I think you're on the advent of a study here. I mean, because, I haven't, I'm not going to get into detail, but, in terms of missing person cases, when you talk about multiple victims of one particular individual, how many times has the first person been found last. So, I mean, you know what I'm saying? So it's they've been allowed to continue their behavior for an X period of time, but the last person that they find when these people are finally brought to justice is actually the first victim. So you raise a really interesting point. I wish I could give some sort of stable to your argument. I mean, because really, I think that you should bring other people onto this topic. Because this seems like it should be a multi-part video. I mean, I'd like to hear, Maxwell. I'd like to hear, like other people, discuss the situation because, I think what you're talking about psychological behavior where there's a kill mentality. Whether or not it's people that are born with almost a animalistic situation where their goal is not to succeed in life, their goal is not to perpetuate in life, their goal is to kill people. And they're very good at it. And it's very animalistic, and it might be barbaric to those that are, graduates or have degrees or have babies and whatever and so on and so forth. But when you look at nature, it's very aligned with that situation. I can't offer any kind of expose because I'm not that type of person. I believe that anyone should do what they want to do. But that said, because I think life is too short, but there obviously are people that don't. And it would be interesting to open up a dialogue in another video to expound on other people's perspective on this issue because what the people you're talking about, they were born for one reason and one reason only, and that was to kill. And you're talking about individuals where they seek out and destroy people that weren't even missed. So the missing of the missing, yeah, of course. I mean, but you're talking about, that's a very sophisticated plan when you think about it in general. I mean, most people, most viewership, when they're listening, if they were dead tomorrow, they were killed by a serial killer. There are people in their family, maybe their children, maybe their husband, maybe their relatives. They would know that they're gone because their routine stopped. The fact that people are able to be missing of the missing, where they're able to just vaporize within society and nobody is able to report it or whatnot, that's a skill. That's a real trait amongst serial killers in terms of they actually were able to seek these people out and snuff them out for their own personal enjoyment, or they got their rocks off, or they were able to,
I'm not 100% sure about that because sometimes they might not have necessarily planned that out to the point where they knew no one would report the prostitute.
But no. But see, that's the point, Bruce. It's not. That's the point. It's not that they planned it out. It's that they innately knew. That's the part that's interesting. It's the part that they actually sought out people subliminally and were able to do this and get away from it, for so long. That's the part that's interesting. It's not that
I would use the word. I would use the word scary. I would use the word scary more than interesting. But okay, then. All right. Let's. I'm just, as
Are
you gonna let me finish the article or no? Because I've been trying to finish these last two paragraphs for like 20 minutes. So
I'm sorry, Bruce. I mean, yeah, of course.
So again, the last thing I mentioned was the fact that the missing persons report at the end of the year, there's a policy to clear the report and not renew the report. So then it doesn't show up again. So that means the numbers could be much higher because if there was no resolution and there is simply a time-stamped protocol to remove an acting missing person file, that's messed up. That's really messed up because that person's still missing. Okay, a similar recommendation goes for missing children. Once they reach the age of 18, many jurisdictions purge them from the files because they've become adults. How messed up is that? Somebody becomes a missing person. They could have been abducted by a serial killer, possibly killed, possibly kept in a cage. And then as soon as they turn 18, jurisdictions simply remove them from the files, so now they're no longer counted among missing persons. Does that bother you at all?
I mean, It does, and welcome to the world of public government. I mean, we're worried about impeachment, we're worried about healthcare, we're worried about college education, we're worried about all of these things. But I mean, this is the reality that we live in terms of physical government. I bandstanded this to several people. I've never been successful. I'm not a politician, so don't care to take it further. But I mean, to anyone that's listening, this is the reality of our government in terms of, the same thing goes with, I have a kid named Johnny. Johnny smoked a lot of pot when he was in high school. Johnny was a bully because he had emotional problems because I, divorced from my husband, Dan. Well, he might have, walked into a restaurant and he might have eaten a meal and he might have walked away. He might have walked into a store and he might have stole something. But when he turns 18, that becomes expunged. What people don't understand is that expungement works on both levels. So when, you have Kate, who was an innocent 9-year-old that was stolen from a park, when she becomes 18, hey, you know what, Kate's not a missing person anymore. There might be a milk carton somewhere that has her picture on it, but
yeah, but how could that? I don't think. How could that even be a policy, though? That's just so. It's so.
But it is. You don't know why, but that's what the voters voted.
Well, it said. I don't think anybody voted on that issue, but
Oh, they did.
Well, not voters.
Oh, they did.
That would be the representative.
Yeah, they did. Of course they did. Well, okay. Yeah, the representative.
Maybe. I don't know. It says here many jurisdictions, so not all jurisdictions purge them from the file. But anyway, I would also take a rehabilitative approach to working with prostitutes, Quinnett said. There are, for example, mobile vans in some area that check in with them. They give them a meal so someone knows where they are and will know if they're missing. The bottom line, it's dangerous out there, especially if you're homeless, gay, elderly, or a prostitute. I think social service agencies need to do a better job in serving a very vulnerable population, Quinnett said. Let's keep track of each other somehow. So that's the article. Now, I would also like to add, I really don't understand the stigma against some of these so-called people living on the fringes of society. I mean, a prostitute, okay, obviously there's a wide range of people that get into.
Well, let me give you a government perspective. Do you want to give me a government perspective?
Well, I'd like to finish my point first without being interrupted.
Of course. Yeah, no, I'm sorry.
There's a wide range of why people become prostitutes, but in general, someone practicing true capitalism, basically exchanging what's rightfully theirs, their body, for something else agreed upon, so either money, whatever trade or barter system, are they really doing something wrong? If there is, I'm of the mind that of common law, if there is no injured party, there is no crime. So all of this just over policing to kind of control populations and generate money, that's all basically fraudulent to anybody who believes in common law. Because under common law, if there's an injured party, there's no crime. Who cares if someone is selling their body, which is rightfully theirs to do so, willingly in a consensual transaction? Why would anybody care? And people do that all the time. For example, if you film it and then that's classified as pornography, somehow that's all completely legal. But if it's not filmed, it's a crime. I never understood that. However, there's all this this negative stigma attached to it. Now, that's not to say, because in certain cases with human trafficking and whatnot, some prostitutes were kind of abused or tricked into that. They're physically abused by their handlers or pimps or whatnot, and they don't really want to do it. That's a different demographic, and that needs to be handled separately. But the people, consenting adults who got into it as adults, and that's what they want to do, I never really understood the negative stigma with that, because pretty much a lot of businesses and anything involving politics, these people are all dealing with fraudulent, with taxes, with theft, and it's all far more shady than a prostitute exchanging what's rightfully theirs with a willing customer.
Well, I think, Bruce, what you're asking is, it's legitimate. There are people out there where they're willing to sell their bodies, for whatever price because they have to make a living. I think there's a couple of points here. The first is that it can't be government regulated. The government is not going to regulate prostitution. It's not going to regulate any situation like that. So the fact that it's not regulated on any measure is always going to cause a stigma. The second thing is that, most people that dip into that field are regarded as people that were given half a chance in life. So the Democratic Party, even the Republican Party, their whole view is to quote unquote reform. It's not that, you could be a Harvard graduate and sell your body, but their whole shtick is that you're not one, so try to become one in order to, advance yourself
Not to get
beyond.
okay, but not to get too philosophical, but isn't what some Harvard graduates do much worse because they exchange their body or certain favors for for mobility within either social circles or within their job. How often do you hear about that where certain favors were done in exchange for upward mobility? Isn't that far worse than being honest about your work like a prostitute?
Well, yeah, and I'm sure it happens. So, I can't argue with that. I'm just saying that, like, in terms of, you're speaking mainly to lower income individuals that have very little resource in terms of advancing their career. The real problem with this, Bruce, is that, like, when it comes to college education and all this other crap, like, suddenly, like, like you need a college education to work at McDonald's. You need a college education to work at, like, picking apples at a farm. All of a sudden, like, we need, and what we're doing is in reality, we're feeding a machine, for the college movement. They charge way too much for what they produce. They don't guarantee anything. They guarantee jobs.
You're going off crazy tangents. All right, let's
No,
wrap
but
this up.
wait. I just want to finish what I'm saying, and I won't go off again. But I am gonna go off on this. We are feeding instruments. That's our problem. The problem is that our whole thing has become who's a part of this, who's a part of that. So we've developed our own class system. Our government has only existed for 270 years, but we've developed within that span of time our own class system of who's willing and able and is trustworthy as opposed to who isn't. And there are certain measures, like, for example, joining the military, to where you become trustworthy, even if you're a foreign citizen. But there's no guarantee.
We got to wrap this up. It has nothing to do with the missing. Okay, so that's the deal basically. The statistics are not accurate.
But am I wrong?
I'm not 100% sure what your point was. You stated things that were technically true.
I never made my point, but was I wrong with what I said?
I honestly, I wasn't paying too much attention. You could start reciting the periodic table of elements, and you might be completely correct about everything. But we're talking about the missing, not colleges and citizens going into the military. So the the missing statistics, very, very important. I think it's an unknown variable that people dismiss, especially when talking cold cases, missing persons. I think people too quickly dismiss the possibility that there are more operating serial killers than are currently assumed by so-called official sources. And if specifically if the serial killers are very, very good, the bodies are never discovered. It's just something to think about, not easily dismissed. This is not a cause for alarmism. I'm not saying everybody go crazy. Just being aware and honestly examining cases where you keep in mind about the unknown unknowns as well as the known unknowns. So these are just all variables. And the missing, it's very, very sad that society does not deem some of these people as worthy of investigating them to see what happened to them, finding them. Did they die? Did they run off? I mean, obviously there's a problem of resources and things of that nature, but in general, just
but it leads to my example of the fact that when you're talking about serial killers, they're targeting people they know don't want to be found.
In a lot of cases, yes. So that's all something to ponder. And we hope you enjoyed another edition of MindShock True Crime. If you like the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. Make sure your device allows those notifications to come through. If you like the podcast, hit the like button. Feel free to share it across social media platforms. And like and follow our Facebook page for exclusive content. And you could also check us out Twitter, Reddit, and Patreon. This is Bruce McGuire signing off.
And JR.
We'll catch you guys next time.